The billionaire bought a poor girl's freedom. Later, she gave him something money can't buy. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. It was a night New York seemed to have forgotten. Rain poured in relentless sheets, turning the narrow alleyways into rivers of light and shadow. Streetlights flickered through the downpour, washing the wet pavement in trembling gold. Beneath one of them stood a young woman, clutching a torn paper bag to her chest. Her name was Lina Hayes. Her coat was too thin for the cold, her shoes soaked through. She looked like she'd been standing there for hours, waiting for something that would never come. Across the street, two men in dark suits argued beside a black SUV. Their voices were muffled by the rain, but sharp enough for Lina to flinch. "You signed the contract," one barked. "You work till you pay every cent. No excuses." Lina's fingers tightened around the bag, trembling. Inside were sketches, dreams she'd drawn since she was a girl, now smudged and damp. "Please," she begged, her voice barely audible. "Just give me one more week. My mom's medicine." The man laughed coldly. "This isn't charity, sweetheart." He snatched the bag from her hands, scattering the papers into puddles. That was when the other man appeared. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply stepped into the light, his black umbrella slicing through the storm. His suit was drenched at the shoulders, rain dripping from his jawline. He looked out of place there, too composed, too calm. "How much does she owe?" His voice was steady, low, the kind that made the air hold still. The man in the suit frowned. "Who are you?" "Someone who's tired of watching people buy and sell dignity," he replied, pulling a checkbook from his coat. Ink bled faintly as he wrote, tore the page clean, and handed it over. "That should cover her debt and your silence." The collector blinked, unsure whether to laugh or obey. But something in the stranger's eyes, cold, steel gray, and certain, made him fold the paper and retreat without another word. Lina stood frozen. The rain soaked her hair, her lashes, her hope. Why would you do that?" she stammered. He glanced at her, rain sliding down his cheek like a tear he'd never admit to. "Because no one deserves to be bought," he said quietly. "Not even for mercy." He started to turn away, but she stepped forward. "Wait, I can't just—" He stopped her with a faint shake of his head and slipped a card into her hand. It was blank, save for an embossed gold emblem. A stylized letter A. "Take care of yourself, Miss Hayes." And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the storm as if the city had swallowed him whole. Lina looked down at the card, then at her ruined sketches drifting away in the puddle. She didn't know it yet, but that night, the man who bought her freedom would also rewrite the story of her life. By morning, the storm had passed, but the city still smelled of wet concrete and gasoline. Lina woke in her small room above a closed laundromat, the same one she had been renting by the week. The ceiling dripped where the rain had found its way in, but at least the noise of the world outside drowned out her thoughts. On the floor beside her bed lay the paper bag from last night, now torn and half empty. She picked it up carefully, drying the edges of her sketches with a towel. The card he had given her was still there, white, smooth, and weighty. No phone number, no name, just that gold emblem, the letter A. She traced it with her fingertip, wondering who he really was. In the gray light of dawn, she whispered to herself, "You should not have taken it." But she had, and now she owed a debt she could never repay. Days turned into weeks. The collector never came back. No one spoke of the night in the rain. Lina found a part-time job at a local diner, serving coffee and stacking plates. It was not much, but it kept her moving. Some evenings she would sit near the window sketching customers in her notebook, faces of strangers who never looked up, laughter she could only draw but not join. And sometimes, without meaning to, she found herself sketching the man from that night. The line of his jaw, the stillness in his eyes, the way his voice had cut through the storm. One afternoon, a customer left a newspaper on the counter. The headline read, "Aurelius Foundation launches Art for Change, a new initiative to support undiscovered artists." Beneath it was a photo. The same man, now in daylight, shaking hands with city officials. The caption, "Ethan Cole, CEO of Aurelius Group." Lina's heart stumbled. The letter A on the card, the calm voice. It was him. She stared until the image blurred, unsure if she felt gratitude or fear. That night, she sat awake with the card under her pillow. "He bought my freedom," she murmured. "But why me?" A week later, a flyer appeared on the diner's notice board. Art for Change is hiring assistant illustrators, no formal degree required. Her manager was closing up when she tore the flyer down. "You an artist now?" he teased. She smiled faintly. Maybe just someone trying to be free. The office of the foundation was nothing like the diner. The lobby smelled of polished wood and coffee beans, the walls lined with paintings from children and street artists. When the receptionist asked for her name, Lina's voice almost broke. Lina Hayes for the assistant position. The interview room was small, filled with sunlight and the quiet hum of computers. The woman across the table glanced through her file. "We like to work with people who understand struggle," she said. "Art that comes from survival has a heartbeat." Lina nodded slowly, feeling the truth of it. As she left, she passed a glass hallway and saw him. Ethan Cole stood by the window, speaking to a group of donors. He looked different in daylight, less untouchable, more human. For a second, his gaze shifted, met hers. Recognition flashed there, brief but certain. She froze, the air tightening in her lungs. He did not say a word, just a faint nod, almost invisible, before turning back to his conversation. When she stepped outside, the city felt lighter somehow. The clouds were parting, and the wind carried the faint scent of rain on asphalt. Lina pressed the card in her pocket, the same one she had carried since that night. Maybe freedom, she thought, was not something you were given. Maybe it was something you learned to carry one small act of courage at a time. The following Monday, Lina received an email with the Aurelius Foundation logo at the top. "Dear Miss Hayes, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted as an assistant illustrator for the Art for Change initiative. Your first day will be this Thursday at 9 a.m. Welcome to the team." She read it 3 times, half expecting it to disappear like a dream. On Thursday morning, she stood at the glass doors of the foundation, her heart racing. The city was bright, the streets still glistening from last night's rain. Inside, a woman with kind eyes greeted her. "You must be Lina. I am Carol, the project coordinator. Let me show you around." The building felt alive, filled with color and soft laughter. Artists painted in open studios, volunteers sorted supplies, and the faint smell of acrylic and coffee hung in the air. Carol led her to a workspace overlooking the courtyard. "This will be yours. We encourage you to draw what you feel, not just what you see." Lina nodded, still overwhelmed. She opened her sketchbook, the same one she had carried through every struggle, and began to draw. Hours passed unnoticed. For the first time in years, she felt useful again. Near evening, a quiet voice came from behind her. "Your lines have weight," the man said. She turned. Ethan Cole stood there, sleeves rolled up, no tie, the light from the window catching the faint silver at his temples. Her breath caught. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "I did not know you would be here." He smiled faintly. "I am here more often than people think. May I?" He gestured toward the sketchbook. She hesitated, then handed it to him. He studied the pages carefully, portraits of children, alleys, a woman holding an umbrella under the rain. "These are not just drawings," he said. "They are stories." Lina looked down, embarrassed. "They are just sketches." "No," he said gently. "They are the kind of truth money cannot buy." She wanted to thank him but found no words. Before she could speak, his phone buzzed, and he excused himself with a polite nod. "Keep going, Miss Hayes. The world needs more of this honesty." After he left, Lina stared at the doorway long after it closed. The rest of the week unfolded like a slow sunrise. She learned the rhythm of the office, the smell of new canvas, the hum of the elevator. Every evening, she passed by the gallery hall where Ethan often stood alone reviewing reports. They never spoke beyond small greetings, but each glance felt like an unspoken acknowledgement of the storm they had once shared. One afternoon, Carol approached her desk. "Lina, the foundation is hosting its annual charity gala next month. We will be featuring pieces from our artists. Ethan wants one of yours in the showcase." Lina froze. "Mine? Why?" "Because your work represents what this program is about, hope out of hardship." That night, Lina stayed late, staring at her blank canvas. She decided to paint the moment that had changed everything the night a stranger bought her freedom. She painted the rain, the umbrella, the hand holding out the check, and in the reflection of the puddle, her own face, not fearful but awake. The painting took 2 weeks. Each stroke felt like closing a wound. When it was done, she signed it quietly in the corner. Freedom, by Lina Hayes. A week later, Ethan passed her in the hall and stopped. "I saw your submission," he said. "It moved me." She smiled, shy but proud. "It is just the truth, Mr. Cole." He paused, meeting her eyes. "The truth is never just anything." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled, softer this time, and walked away, leaving her heart beating faster than she could explain. Outside, the evening light stretched long over the city, and Lina whispered to herself, "Maybe freedom begins when someone believes in your worth, even before you do." The weeks leading up to the charity gala passed in a blur of color and quiet anticipation. Lina poured herself into the final details of her painting while the foundation buzzed with preparation. Volunteers rehearsed speeches, designers adjusted lighting, and every corridor smelled faintly of fresh flowers. On the morning of the event, she arrived early, her hands trembling as she placed her artwork in the grand gallery hall. The title card beside it read, "Freedom," by Lina Hayes. Standing back, she felt a strange mix of pride and fear. This was the first time her story, her pain and redemption would be seen by the world. That evening, the foundation's ballroom shimmered with elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung above tables, draped in ivory cloth. The city's elite filled the room, businessmen, artists, and philanthropists, dressed in black and gold. Lina stood near the edge of the crowd, wearing a simple navy dress Carol had helped her borrow. She felt small amid the sparkle, but also, for once, that she belonged. A gentle hand touched her shoulder. "Nervous?" It was Carol, smiling. "You did beautifully. Everyone is talking about your painting." Lina's chest warmed. Across the room, Ethan was speaking with a group of investors, his posture calm and assured. When their eyes met, he inclined his head slightly, a silent encouragement. The host took the stage. "Tonight, we celebrate the power of compassion," he announced. "The Aurelius Foundation was built on the belief that kindness can rebuild lives. Our founder, Mr. Ethan Cole, exemplifies that spirit." Applause filled the room as Ethan stepped forward. His speech was simple, genuine. "I built a company that could buy almost anything," he said. "But it took meeting ordinary people with extraordinary hearts to realize the most valuable things in life cannot be bought. Every artist here has proven that truth." Lina's throat tightened as he spoke. When the auction segment began, guests bid generously on several art pieces. Then the spotlight shifted to her painting. The host smiled. This piece, titled Freedom, was created by a young artist who once stood on the edge of losing everything. Her work reminds us that dignity, once restored, becomes the foundation of hope. The bidding started at $10,000, and hands immediately went up. Lina watched in disbelief as the numbers climbed 15, 20, then 30,000. Her chest ached with emotion. The host called, "Sold, to the gentleman at table 7. Ethan nodded politely to the bidder, but his eyes lingered on her. Later, when the hall began to clear, Lina slipped out to the terrace for air. The night was warm, the city lights trembling in the distance. She heard footsteps behind her. "You disappeared," Ethan said quietly. "I wanted to thank you," she replied. "For everything, for giving people like me a chance." He shook his head. "You earned it, Lina. I only opened a door." She hesitated, the question she had carried for months pressing to the surface. "Why did you help me that night? You did not even know who I was." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "Because once, someone did the same for me. I was younger, angry, reckless. A stranger paid my debts and asked for nothing in return. I promised myself that if I ever had the power, I would do the same for someone else." The confession hung in the air like a soft confession of pain. Lina's eyes glistened. "So you believe in debts of the heart?" "No," he said. "I believe in choices. You chose to start again. That was your strength, not my gift." The silence between them was deep and tender. From inside, faint music floated through the open doors. Ethan smiled faintly. "You should be proud tonight, Lina. You changed more lives than you know." When he turned to go, she whispered, "So did you." For a long moment, they stood there, neither moving, both knowing something had shifted, something that could never be bought, only found. In the distance, the city hummed like a promise yet to be fulfilled. The following days after, the gala felt almost unreal to Lina. Her painting had sold for more money than she had ever seen, And yet the most valuable part was not the check she received, but the letters that arrived at the foundation. Dozens of people wrote, saying her work had touched them, that it reminded them of their own battles for freedom and dignity. She read every message with tears in her eyes, realizing how far she had come from the girl standing helpless in the rain. Ethan congratulated her briefly in the hallway, his words formal but his eyes soft. "You have inspired people, Lina," he said. "That is what real success looks like." She thanked him, but a small ache remained in her chest, a quiet pull that was more than gratitude. A week later, Carol invited her to help plan a community outreach project in one of the poorer neighborhoods. Ethan would be attending to review the proposals. Lina spent hours preparing sketches and concepts for the event. On the morning of the presentation, she arrived early, carrying her materials in a canvas bag. The meeting took place in a renovated warehouse that served as the foundation's new art hub. As she arranged her notes, Ethan entered, dressed casually in a gray shirt and rolled sleeves. "Good morning, everyone," he greeted. His presence filled the room with calm authority. When it was her turn, Lina stood before the small group, hands trembling slightly. "I want to create a traveling art program," she explained. "Workshops for children who cannot afford art classes. Let them tell their stories through paint instead of pain." When she finished, the room fell silent for a moment. Then Ethan nodded slowly. "Approved," he said simply. "We will fund it entirely." Her eyes widened. "Just like that?" "Just like that. It is a good idea. You are the right person to lead it." For the next few months, they worked side by side more often. They traveled to schools and community centers, meeting families who had never set foot in a gallery before. Lina saw Ethan in a new light, laughing with children, helping carry supplies, listening more than he spoke. Beneath the polished exterior, he was kind, almost humble. Late one evening, after a long drive back to the city, they stopped at a small diner for coffee. The place was quiet except for an old jukebox humming in the corner. Ethan looked out the window, his reflection pale in the glass. "You know," he said softly, "the first time I saw you, I thought you were going to hate me." Lina smiled faintly. "I was too scared to hate anyone that night." "You looked at me like I was the enemy," he said. "Maybe I was. I had spent so long buying solutions that I forgot some people just need to be seen." She watched him carefully, hearing the weariness in his tone. "Maybe we both forgot something that night," she said. "You forgot what kindness costs, and I forgot what it is worth." He turned to her then, and for the first time, there was no distance in his eyes. "You are right," he said. The silence stretched between them, fragile but full of meaning. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping gently against the window. Ethan smiled faintly. "Seems the rain follows us," he murmured. Lina laughed softly. "Maybe it just likes to see us start over." They sat there until the coffee went cold, speaking of art, hope, and the strange way lives can cross and change. When they left, Ethan walked her to her apartment. At the door, he paused. "Lina, you should know something," he said quietly. "Freedom is not something you owe me. It is something you have taught me." She stood there frozen as he turned and walked away into the night, leaving her heart full and unsteady. For the first time, she realized that the man who once bought her freedom had now found his own. Autumn arrived quietly, brushing the city with amber light and cool wind. The Foundation's outreach program had grown faster than anyone expected, and Lina found herself busier than ever. She spent her days traveling to schools, painting with children, and helping them tell their stories through color and shape. Ethan remained deeply involved, visiting every site, speaking less, but watching closely. There was something about him that had changed. Since the gala, his calm seemed softer, his smile more real. One late afternoon, Lina stayed behind at the art hub to finish sorting supplies. The sky outside burned orange, the windows reflecting streaks of gold. She was packing brushes into boxes when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You are still working?" Ethan stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. She smiled. "Someone has to make sure the paint does not dry before tomorrow." He handed her a cup. "Then let me help." They sat on the floor among scattered canvases, sipping coffee as the last light faded. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of the city filled the silence. Finally, Ethan said, "Do you ever think about that night?" She looked down at her cup. "Every time it rains," she admitted, "it reminds me how quickly life can change." He nodded slowly. "For me too. That night I saw a version of myself I did not like. I was the man who could buy anything except peace. And now? She asked gently. He paused, searching for the right words. Now I think peace looks a lot like this, he said, gesturing around them, the paint-stained floor, the laughter echoing faintly from the hallway, her presence beside him. Lina's chest tightened. She wanted to say something, but before she could, a voice called from the hallway. Mr. Cole, the board meeting is starting in 10 minutes. Ethan sighed, setting his cup down. Duty calls, he said softly. Thank you for staying late, Lina. Always, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Days later, news broke that the Foundation's board was considering merging with a corporate sponsor that had a reputation for exploiting artists. Rumors spread quickly. One afternoon, Carol rushed into the art hub breathless. Lina, Ethan is under pressure to sign the deal, she said. If he agrees, the outreach program will lose its independence. Lina felt her stomach twist. He would not do that, she said, but doubt crept in anyway. That evening, she went to his office. The lights were low, the skyline glimmering through the glass behind him. Is it true? She asked. Ethan looked tired. Yes, they want to absorb the Foundation into their brand. It would triple our funding but change everything we stand for. So what will you do? She asked. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The board wants me to sign tomorrow. Lina stepped closer. You built this place to help people like me. Do not let them turn it into a logo. Ethan looked at her, his eyes dark and conflicted. You think I do not know that? They are threatening to pull their support from our programs overseas. Then fight them, she said. You taught me that freedom is not given, it is lived. Live it, Ethan. For a moment, the air between them crackled with unspoken emotion. He rose from his chair, stepping toward her. You always find the words I cannot, he said quietly. Maybe that is why you scare me. I do not want to scare you, she whispered. I just want you to remember who you are. He held her gaze for a long second, then nodded slowly. Thank you, Lina. When she left his office, her heart pounded with fear and hope. The next morning, the headlines made her stop in her tracks. Aurelius Foundation rejects corporate merger, CEO chooses integrity over profit. Beneath it was a quote from Ethan Cole. Some things are worth more than numbers. Dignity is one of them. Lina smiled through tears. For the first time, she realized he had listened not just to her words, but to her heart. The decision Ethan made sent shockwaves through the city's business circles. Some called him foolish for rejecting the merger, others called him brave. But to Lina, it was the moment he finally stepped into the man he was meant to be. In the days that followed, journalists camped outside the Foundation, eager for a statement. Ethan refused interviews, focusing instead on the work that had started it all. Let them talk, he said to his staff. We will speak through our actions. Lina noticed how the pressure weighed on him. He worked late, skipped meals, and spent hours reviewing budgets to make sure no programs were cut. One night, she found him asleep at his desk, his glasses still on, papers scattered around him. She gently set a blanket over his shoulders. He stirred but did not wake. For a moment, she just stood there, watching the man who had once seemed untouchable now look so human, so tired, yet so kind. The next morning, he appeared at her workstation with coffee. I owe you one, he said with a tired smile. You owe me rest, she teased, and he laughed softly. It was the first real laugh she had heard from him. But not everyone was pleased with his decision. A week later, a financial article accused Ethan of misusing foundation funds, twisting his choice into a scandal. The board called an emergency meeting. Lina sat in the back of the conference room, her heart pounding as investors demanded explanations. Mr. Cole, one of them said coldly, you have jeopardized millions in funding. How do you intend to fix this? Ethan's voice was calm but firm. By reminding you that this foundation was built on trust, not profit. The room buzzed with whispers. When the meeting ended, he walked out in silence. Lina followed him to the rooftop terrace where the city stretched below, gray and endless. They will come after you for this, she said quietly. I know, he replied, but I can live with losing money. I cannot live with losing what this place stands for. She stepped closer, her eyes shining with something deeper than admiration. You did the right thing, she said. Even if it costs you everything. He looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. You sound just like me when I am pretending to be brave. You are not pretending, she said softly. You just needed someone to remind you. There was a long pause, the kind that carries more truth than words. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a moment he reached up, brushing a strand from her face before pulling his hand back. "Lina," he said quietly, "if I lose this foundation, you can still find work elsewhere. You do not have to stay." She shook her head. "I am not here because of the job. I am here because of what it means." The next few days were tense. An audit cleared Ethan of wrongdoing, but the damage to his reputation lingered. Donors withdrew, projects were delayed, and the future seemed uncertain. One evening, Lina found him standing alone in the empty gallery, staring at her painting Freedom. The lights reflected softly off the canvas. "It feels like a lifetime ago," he murmured. "You freed me once," she said, standing beside him. "Now let me return the favor." He turned to her, eyes weary but filled with something like wonder. "How?" She smiled faintly. "By reminding you that your worth is not measured by headlines or bank accounts. It is measured by how many lives you lift back to their feet." Ethan exhaled slowly, and for the first time in weeks his shoulders relaxed. "You really believe that, do you not?" "With everything I have," she said. The gallery fell silent except for the steady hum of the city below. He looked at her, the corners of his mouth softening. "You are extraordinary, Lina Hayes." She smiled gently. "And you are finally becoming who you were meant to be." For a long moment, they simply stood there, side by side, as if the weight of the world had lightened, if only for a breath. Winter settled over the city like a quiet sigh, wrapping the streets in silver light and soft frost. The foundation had survived the storm of criticism, but it was clear that things had changed. Some sponsors left, yet others came forward, drawn not by profit but by purpose. Ethan seemed lighter these days, though there was still a shadow behind his calm eyes. Lina noticed it every time he looked out the window too long, as if searching for something he could not name. One Friday evening she found him in the community center where children were painting murals on the walls. Their laughter filled the air, bright and unrestrained. Ethan was kneeling beside a boy, helping him steady a brush. Lina stood quietly, watching the moment unfold. When the boy ran off to show his work, Ethan glanced over his shoulder. "You should not sneak up on people," he said with a smile. "I was not sneaking," she replied. "I was admiring good leadership." He laughed softly. "Leadership is just listening to people who have more heart than you do." She stepped closer. "You have more heart than you realize." They worked together that night, cleaning up spilled paint, packing brushes, and hanging the children's finished work to dry. By the time they left, snow had begun to fall. The world outside felt hushed, dreamlike. Ethan offered her his coat, and she hesitated for a moment before accepting. "This feels familiar," she said with a teasing smile. "The last time you gave someone a coat, their life changed forever." He chuckled. "Then I hope history repeats itself." The walk back to the subway was quiet but full of unspoken things. When they reached the station entrance, Lina turned to him. "Ethan, what are you looking for?" she asked. He seemed taken aback. "What do you mean?" "Every time you stare out those windows, I can tell you are searching for something," she said softly. "Maybe it is peace, maybe it is forgiveness." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Maybe it is both." She touched his arm gently. "Then stop searching so far away. Sometimes what we are looking for is right beside us." The next morning, she arrived at work to find an envelope on her desk. Inside was a handwritten note. "Meet me at the gallery tonight at 8. No signature, but she knew the handwriting. That evening the gallery was dimly lit, candles lining the walkway. In the center stood a single new painting on an easel, covered with a white cloth. Ethan was waiting nearby, dressed simply, his expression unreadable. "You made it," he said quietly. "Of course. What is all this?" He gestured to the covered frame. "A collaboration. You inspired it." With a gentle pull, he removed the cloth. The painting beneath took her breath away. It was the same scene from her earlier work, rain falling on a city street, but this time, two figures stood together beneath one umbrella, their reflections merging in the puddle below. Across the bottom were the words, "Freedom, together." Her voice trembled. "You painted this?" "I started it," he said, "but it was not finished until you arrived." For a long moment she could not speak. "Ethan, this is beautiful." "So are you," he said before he could stop himself. The words hung in the air between them, vulnerable and real. She smiled, her eyes glistening. I think that might be the first time you have ever said something you could not calculate. He laughed softly. You make it sound dangerous. It is, she whispered. But maybe that is the point. The air between them grew still, heavy with emotion neither dared name. Then, slowly, Ethan reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. Lina, you gave me something I never thought I would have again, he said. You taught me that love is not a transaction. It is trust. She met his gaze, her heart pounding. Then do not be afraid of it. For the first time he smiled without hesitation, the weight of years falling away. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the city in quiet forgiveness, as if the world itself was blessing what had just begun. Spring arrived like a quiet promise, washing the city in light and color. The foundation bloomed again, stronger than before, supported now by people who believed in what it stood for. The outreach program expanded to new towns, children's laughter echoing through streets that had long forgotten joy. Lina continued to lead with grace, her hands always stained with paint, her heart open and steady. Ethan stood beside her at every milestone, no longer the distant billionaire who hid behind glass walls, but a man who had learned the meaning of freedom. One morning, as sunlight poured into the main gallery, Lina found a new exhibit being set up. A large banner read, "One Kindness Day celebrating stories that changed lives." The idea had been Ethan's, but the heart of it belonged to her. The centerpiece of the exhibit was their shared painting, Freedom, Together. Beneath it hung a small plaque with the words, "Dedicated to every act of courage that begins in kindness." Guests filled the hall, artists, volunteers, children, even people who had once doubted the foundation's vision. As Lina walked through the crowd, she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. Ethan stood there, wearing a simple navy suit, his smile calm but full of meaning. "You did it," he said softly. "No," she replied. "We did." He nodded, his eyes warm. "Do you remember the night it all began?" "How could I forget?" she said with a quiet laugh. "A stranger in the rain, a blank card, and a life I never expected." "That night changed me too," he said. "You taught me that saving someone's freedom is not about power. It is about believing they deserve a second chance." She looked up at him, her voice trembling slightly. "And you taught me that kindness is not weakness, it is strength." They stood there as applause rippled through the hall. The host stepped onto the stage, calling their names. "Please welcome Ethan Cole and Lina Hayes, the vision behind Art for Change." The crowd cheered as they walked up together. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "When I met Lina, I thought I was helping someone. I was wrong. She helped me remember who I was." He paused, glancing at her. "And she reminded me that love, like art, only matters when it is shared." The audience fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause. After the ceremony, when the lights dimmed and the guests had gone, Ethan and Lina remained in the gallery. The candles flickered against the glass, their reflections mingling on the floor. "It feels strange," Lina said softly. "Like we have come full circle." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper, the old receipt from years ago, the one he had used to buy her freedom. The ink had faded, but the memory remained sharp. "This has been in my desk since that night," he said, "but I think it belongs to you now." She took it carefully, her fingers brushing his. "I do not need proof of that night," she said. "It lives here." She touched her chest, over her heart. He smiled gently. "Then let me offer you something new instead." From his other hand, he revealed a small ring, simple, silver, shaped like an unbroken circle. "Not a symbol of debt," he said, "but of promise." Her breath caught. "Ethan." "Lina," he said softly, "you gave me something money can never buy, a chance to be real. Will you share the rest of your story with me?" Her answer came in a whisper, filled with warmth. "Yes." The moment hung in the air like the final brushstroke on a canvas, perfect and complete. Outside, the city glowed beneath the soft rain, the same rain that had once bound them in fate. Now it felt like a blessing, a gentle applause from the sky. And for the first time, they walked out together not as savior and saved, but as equals, carrying the same truth, that love, when born from kindness, is the purest form of freedom.